So good evening all on livestream.com. So I thought back from the London Chess Classic, a grueling tournament indeed. If you want to be analysing for hours and hours and hours and evaluating positions, then FIDE tournaments with 30-second increments per move are one way of doing that. Okay, let's have a look at what happens in the elite section of the London Classic. Vladimir Kramnik became the victor of the tournament. Just press play button to get sound, because I've stopped and started the broadcast on ChessBase, so hopefully it should be back. So okay, so that's back for Socrates, good. So evening all to everyone, so on ChessBase and livestream. So let's go with this game, Nigel Short against Vladimir Kramnik. So e4 from Nigel, and Kramnik replied with e5, solid. No, not much adventure in his opening here after knight f3, knight c6. And after bishop b5, the ultra solid kind of Russian system, knight f6, which could be a Berlin Wall if as well. But Nigel varied now from sort of normal moves. Well, he went into the kind of four knights with bishop b5 by playing the move knight c3 here. And it seems, Black got a good game actually from the opening with this next move. The knight basically went into d4, so moving a piece twice in the opening would seem to break some sort of principle. But here it's tricky if white takes the pawn on e5. I think I've had that in a correspondence game, and I had a terrible position after a few moves. It's probably not wise to play knight takes e5. But Nigel, he actually took on d4 after e takes d4, e5 now, and it seems Black's heading for a seemingly very solid, pleasant position now after d takes c3, e takes f6, queen takes f6. We're going to evaluate the position very soon now. D takes c3. Let's take stock here. So there seems to be double pawns here. Black's structure is absolutely fine. There's a loose bishop on b5. Black has the two bishops, so there's white though. But does Black have any problems here whatsoever from this position? As white, I think I might be a little bit disappointed. I don't know what you guys think. Would you have a feeling of disappointment here after bishop c5? It seems, where is white's advantage in this position? So anyway, threatened with mate. He could castle, but Nigel threw in a check. And we have queen e6 just defending that check. So the queens are going to come off as well. Castles, and Vladimir decided not to take the queen off here. He let white, kept white for the offer of getting the queens off. He just castled as well. So, is Nigel hoping for a draw from here? I'm not really sure, but he didn't want to exchange off queens. If he does play queen takes e6, then Black might consider f takes, and there might be some pressure here on f2, and maybe b6 bishop b7. Who knows? Maybe that's a dynamic continuation for Black. But Nigel plays queen f3, and we seem to have a simple but powerful move now, d6, which means potentially Black can again offer the exchange of queens rather annoyingly with this battery, and that happens now after bishop g5, just queen f5, threatening also of course to double the pawn, so white has to do something about this. And Nigel took the plunge here, it seems, in a strange way. He played seemingly aggressive bishop e7, which would seem attractive because these bishops are working together on these squares to trap the rook. The thing is, there's a slight snag here. It's as if the pieces have been trapped now. The bishop is going to be trapped in a variation here. First, black takes on f3, so there's now double pawns on both sides, which look not the most pleasant. And after a6, this bishop's kicked, and now Nigel can't really take on f8 because taking the bishop back, then I think f6 would trap that bishop in. So, for example, so say he took, I think takes, and if the bishop tries to come out, then f6. And then munch time, you know, lunchtime, munch time with king f7. And if bishop d8, it's not going to last long, that bishop inside the black pawn chain. So Nigel for the moment plays bishop a4. Then the bishop's kicked again, b5. And now, of course, the bishop's been blocked, you know, from e8. So if the bishop did move, now there's rook e8. So really it seems this looks like a problem position, because actually if Nigel doesn't play b4 like he did, this doesn't look pleasant. Bishop b3, rook e8, the bishop's being driven back, and it looks like a positional disaster really after bishop g5. Isn't this just a positional disaster? Let's imagine rook e2. So black's also got now bishop h3, rook e8. He'd control the e file. It looks very, very unpleasant for white. Banco Gamter, you said instead of bishop e7, queen g3 looks like an interesting try on live stream. So let's have a look at that. So bishop e7 was played. So you say that queen g3 looks like an interesting try. That would seem to be better than the game, because the game looks disastrous actually as it was played, even that position we'd gone to. I don't know if anyone disagrees, but it looks, maybe queen takes c2, is that too risky? If bishop f6, there's queen g6. If bishop d3, then I don't know, queen a4, bishop f6, there's queen g4, maybe that's the problem, c2. So this continuation in the game was terrible anyway. The bishop seemed to, you know, white's got double pawns on both sides of the board. Black's got a lovely possession of the e file. From playing, you know, nothing system, you know, Kramnik's got a big positional advantage. Sorry, b4 was played here. Let's go back. So in this position, b4, and Vladimir played rook e8. Rook fe1, protecting the bishop. Now this bishop goes back, so the a4 bishop needs to move. And it's about to, something really, really horrible is about to happen, even worse than what's already happened. After bishop b7, we have a beautiful bishop now striking against that double pawn. King is forced to get involved and protect it. And now d5. And this is the sort of thing Capablanca would do to some opponents. Imprison. This poor bishop has been imprisoned on b3. You know, if black can do this and then get the bishop out, we have here a prisoner, a piece down situation. A prisoner. And this is what's about to occur. Rook e5, and the bishop's now a prisoner. Isn't that really sick positionally? And isn't it amazing? You know, a super grandmaster can be positionally like murdered, even with the white pieces. Nigel approaching, you know, 2700 again, and he's playing like a piece down with two sets of double pawns. This looks like you know, bad teeth situation as well. So anyway, he plays rook a-e1. Now bishop c7, evicting the rook from e5. And the bishop comes to enjoy a pleasant diagonal. Maybe. Or does it? It goes to d7 first, actually. Bishop h4, inviting an exchange of rooks. Get the rooks off. Because white is a piece down. Why not just get everything off and celebrate the fact that white is a bishop down here? How is this bishop ever going to get outside the pawn chain? It's hemmed in by its c2 pawn. A sick prisoner of the position. Bishop g3. And now Vladimir didn't want to exchange off bishops because that might undouble the pawns. And the king might then, come over. Maybe. So bishop d8, letting white suffer with these double pawns as well. Because remember, this bishop can't easily go onto this diagonal via f2 at the moment. So bishop e5, f6, bishop b8, okay, bishop g6. Oh dear. AB, and this bishop still remains a prisoner, and the king and these two guys might be working together quite soon, very well. Oh dear. So king f1, king f7, the black king is going to be higher quality soon than the white king. King e3, check. Bishop h5, the king's really tied down to these two pawns. Looks sick. It looks sicker than my round 1 game that I had against someone 300 points lower. At least I had some winning chances. This doesn't look good. This looks like a bad bishop and bad pawn structure. Two major strategic disasters for the price of one. Bishop a2, g5. And now what's happening here with g5? Vladimir's next sadistic plan seems to involve undoubling these pawns, which might create some sort of different exploitable weakness. Although structurally it looks like a disaster, how does black make progress? So I think he's come up with the idea of actually undoubling the pawns, which is not really a favour for white. It's a bit of a sick thing to do. It's just going to get more squares in some way to play g4 at some point. And g4 is now arriving on the scene. So Nigel didn't take. If he takes, I don't know. It looks as though this doesn't look too healthy either. But say takes f3, bishop maybe here. I think in this situation we might have a king maneuver, but f4 might be a problem. So maybe arranging something like this and then the king coming. This might be weak. So anyway, Nigel, he didn't do that. He played king f1, sacking a pawn. It wasn't even taken. g3. So forcibly undoubling white's pawns. fg, fg. Bishop takes f3. And now look at these squares available for the king to infiltrate. So bishop a2, not really doing anything with that bishop. Bishop e3, sadistic move again. Look at these bishops cutting like this, complementary. The king is stranded. This king is free to kind of roam into the position and maybe, king e4, d4 or something, or just over here in some sort of zugzwang. So here actually, Nigel, basically a piece down, and his king's not as active as black's king. Actually resigned here. So what would be the winning plan for black actually in this position? Does anyone know from previous annotations of this game? What's the most incisive winning plan for black? I guess he wants the two bishops to remain there because it's imprisoning the king as well. What would we do here for black then? I think one idea that springs to mind, maybe king here, h5, h4. Then if maybe bishop f2, there's bishop f4. This looks like a target. Okay, there's numerous winning plans, I guess, because white's not able to do anything with his king or his bishop, which is bad news. Okay, the plan that combined with bishop d2 for targeting c3 and b4. Yes, bishop d2 will start to win c3 as well. Okay. It's a slow, horrible, painful loss in this position. Bring king to h3 and then bishop d2 is another suggestion. Yeah. And then bishop d2. Okay. Yes, because this bishop won't be able to defend c3 and h2. Okay. So let's do a quick overview and summary of this strange, disastrous game for white. So basically, this knight f6 maybe seemed to psych out Nigel that he didn't want a dull, boring game. But in doing so, this kind of negative emotional reaction creates exploitable weaknesses sometimes. I find that myself. If you fear opponents before a game, or if you're in pain after a game, the negative psychology might create weaknesses. And here, maybe this knight c3 isn't the best line, and black seem to develop a dangerous game now positionally after e5. Because it's white's pawns that are getting doubled, and black's structure is intact. This can't be a good line for white, can it? This line here looks as though black's comfortably equalised, and he doesn't mind the exchange of queens. And now it goes from one disaster to another with this bishop move, bishop e7, more doubled pawns, and now trapped bishop on b3. About to arrive as another negative asset. So a horrendous game. It's really a sick positional game. The rook's just coming off. So kind of effortless, seemingly effortless win. Black didn't have to do too much or worry about king safety. So it could have arisen from some negative emotions surrounding the dullness of the Berlin Wall or something to avoid that. But instead, he gets positionally done over in this game. But yeah, so let's have a look at another Kramnik game. So it seems Kramnik beats all the British players. By the way, sorry, I didn't mean to spoil the results, but it's probably well known anyway. But let's have a look at another one. So Kramnik against Adams. So he played Kramnik against Adams, played d4, and Adams doesn't mess around with dynamic risky rubbish that sometimes I do, like the King's Indian defence or the Dutch defence, even worse. No, Adams is pretty solid in general. He plays Nimzo Indians and stuff. So this was Nimzo Indian going into the usual Queen's Indian, because people like to avoid the Nimzo to go to the Queen's Indian. Bishop b4 is like Bogo Indian territory, I think. Bogolojubov, classic player who used to play Alekhine a lot. So he exchanges off the dark square bishops, which might represent a problem later sometimes if black plays d5. These dark squares might be a little bit weaker somehow. But Adams, this must be in Adams's preparation. This line, bishop g2. So black castles. Sorry, Benko Gambitier isn't the hybrid idea of the Bogo cat. This the hybrid idea. Don't know. Okay, maybe. so knight f3 looks pretty dull to me. This sort of position as black. I don't know, but drawing is pretty solid result if black can draw. He snatches a pawn here. D takes c4, which seems to give it gives white seemingly a bit of pressure on the c file. Once white recaptures this pawn, which he can do with knight a3 because the queen's in the way of knight d2, he can try and recapture this pawn, and then he's got a grip on this dark square. These two knights are going to be focusing in on the dark squares. There's no dark square bishop for black, so is white getting a nagging, annoying positional edge here, which Kramnik loves? So knight a3. There might be the temptation, you would think, of playing knight b6, but I think this just delays the inevitable, doesn't it? Either knight e5 would try and recapture the pawn, or maybe just rook c1, or both. So actually e5, and it seems after knight takes c4, Adams's idea is e4, which seems sort of strange actually, because this pawn might be potentially weak on e4. It's facing the thin Ke2 bishop now after knight fe5. But this must be a prepared idea. Knight b6 and now knight e3. And I think Vladimir was saying in the commentary room, he did go over this game, and I was there at the time when he went over this game actually, in the commentary room at the Classic. I think he didn't really think black was that solid as was claimed because of this potentially weak pawn. You know, if Vladimir supports d4, then queen c2, this pawn's a bit vulnerable, the c file's a bit vulnerable. It's not as solid as all that, the black position here. So anyway, black played a5, which okay, why did Adams play a5 here? Is there actually a positional threat of some sort? So play rook d1 and queen a5? Is that it? It seems a little bit strange to play a5. Does anyone have any theories on that? Why does black play a5 here? Is it simply to stop b4? Maybe that's the main idea, to stop b4. Why not knight g5? Knight g5 is not a legal move, is it, Toshin? What do you mean knight g5? 11 knight g5. Sorry, back on move 11. When he had played a knight e5, you say knight g5. Maybe just rook e8. But then I suppose queen, I don't know, queen f4. You seem to have a point. No, does anyone have a clue here? Why not knight g5? Just out of interest. I'm not sure. It's an interesting question actually. That's a difficult one to answer. This pawn does seem loose. It does seem like a logical idea to target the pawn. b5, someone's saying. Maybe b5. Right. For then maybe bishop b7. I see. So say there's knight a5. Interesting. Oh, sorry, c5. Attacking. Okay, so he didn't go in for that anyway. But potentially black may be trying for bishop b7 if this knight did move, and then rook e8. So instead this knight fe5 does cause other problems anyway. So let's go back there to this game continuation. So a5, which I think might have been designed to stop b4. Okay, so white plays now rook ac1, so we start to see some pressure on the c file. c6. Now b3, so now a4 can be answered with b4, maybe. Deprives the knight of key squares. Rook e8 and now rook fd1. So the queen is now free to move now that the rook's protecting the pawn on d4. Okay, so bishop e6. Bit more pressure. That's like a torture rack positionally. Rook c5. So now a5 is coming into question. It's on the firing line. Pawn moves, but now b4. So what's happened here? b5 looks like a classic minority attack to fracture the pawns now. a3 looks like a loose pawn as well. But here a surprising positional move is played, which looks unusual, but seems maybe to fit the position very well. Rook a5. So not minding, of course, you know, taking this pawn looks as though it's going to be vulnerable. Queen d6. Rook c1, as if maybe, you know, rook c5 or rook c3 might become a problem. So knight d5. Knight d5 takes 2 minor pieces off. Positional game, knight c4 and a3. Look at that a3 pawn, vulnerable. Queen e7, is it about to be taken? No. Maybe black is threatening e3. That's stopped with e3. h5, is this desperation? a3 looks extremely vulnerable now. But Kramnik takes on a8 and plays knight b6. So the idea is to get rid of this bishop first before coming back to this pawn later. He gets rid of the bishop. Rook c5, protecting b4 from the stare of knight and the queen. Again, b5 is on the cards. h4, I'm not really sure. This is solid. This is solid. How can black loosen white's king? In fact, the bishop now even plays bishop f1, supporting a minority attack if needed. g6 is now the minority attack, ripping up the black pawn structure on the queen side. C takes, rook takes. So maybe now, queen a5 is a serious threat on d8 and on d5. Queen c7, at least it prevents queen a5, it can be exchanged off. But queen a5 anyway. And of course a3 is under fire, d5 is under fire. So black responds with b6, and Kramnik is now a pawn up. Queen takes a3. Solid position. Doesn't look as though black's got king attack here. Thin Ke2 bishop is not bad over there. So now we reach a technical phase of the game. Queen b3 attacking the knight on d5. That's the move. Rook b4. Black's tied up to b6. And some technical moves now. Rooks come off. And now, actually, a cheeky little move, just taking another pawn. Seemingly, fracturing the pawns a little bit. Snapping up another pawn, 2 pawns up. It's going to take some energy for black to get that pawn back. Though, how does black get the pawn back? He plays knight g4. Are there really cheapos here arising? No, h3 just kicked the knight away. Queen b5. And now look, the queen's got access to g5. Look, the pawn is supporting g5. Queen f6. But now instead of queen g5, you can actually get rid of the queens. Queen e5, pinning the queen to the king. Bishop g2. Now another third pawn. It will be 3 pawns down if he wins e4. Knight d6. And now Vladimir plays a4, trying to fix this pawn. And if the pawn moves, maybe a5 anyway. Takes, knight c4. 3 pawns up for the moment. 2 pawns up. But one is doubled. So are these pawns easy to exploit? It's 2 pawns up for white. King comes in. f6. Okay, so bishop c2. What's the plan with bishop c2? Maybe f4 is going to be useful soon. Bishop d3. No need to rush. The king can come a bit more aggressive into the game. Avoid the knight e5 check. Bishop e2. And now the king looks as though it's going to venture across if allowed to, but at the moment the knight's stopping it. If it can come over to this pawn. Now there's an immediate threat, maybe knight c5 check. If king e4, knight c5 check. h5, which gives up one of the double pawns, but gets this f5 square for the king. Horrible, because now there's pressure on f6 now, and the king can also come like this. Sick. So he does take on f6, and he's got 2 connected passed pawns now. If Adams did take on a4, then this pawn looks pretty strong. So instead he plays the check to win f2. But here, unfortunately, the knight has no squares after h4. Where does the knight go? Oh dear. The knight's stranded. I can go to h1. It's not particularly pleasant to go to h1. Just king f1. Where's this knight going? Knight's gone, isn't it? It's trapped. No square, no square. Bishop's holding it. Can't go here. It's a stranded knight. So I think the winning plan is just to munch the knight here. Knight h1 was played maybe, Kf4, and here Adams resigns. The poor knight's going to be eaten. I don't know, he seems to be positionally a nightmare to play against. Something horrible happens to his opponent's pieces. So let's have a quick look at that. It's a technical positional game. Probably very hard for us mere mortals to simulate in our own games. The essence of it, it seems to be a minority attack on the queen's side, combined with a slow capture on e3. So interestingly, this knight b6 got rid of, simplified the position, getting rid of that bishop, and now back for this minority attack again. Now a3 drops, and then this kind of position where he won another pawn over there, but it was only doubled. Was it actually going to be useful, this pawn? It did turn out to be useful pretty soon for h5 in the end game. So h5 was a killer move coming up, which gave the white king more squares. Now f5, the f5 square made an entrance for. So after that, the knight's pretty desperately placed actually. When it's on f2, it's a losing knight's position. h4, end of knight, end of game. The king's about to munch it. Okay, so there goes Adams. So let's have a look at another Kramnik game. So this time Howell. Okay, so white against David Howell. Knight f3. Okay, solid. And then d4 to d5. After knight f6, Howell dares to play the Queen's Gambit accepted. D takes c4. I don't know how many of you guys play, or boys and girls play the Queen's Gambit accepted. Would you ever play the Queen's Gambit accepted? Any of you? Is it a solid choice, Queen's Gambit accepted? Can Kramnik get pressure from it? It looks like standard moves that I've seen before, theoretically. These are all standard moves. The timing is very precise for white, often. So a3, and now black stretches on the queen's side. Bishop a2, bishop b7. And now this is the standard move which you play as white here, is queen e2. So you temporarily allow cd4 because you've got rook d1 and you've got this thing on the queen. So you're getting your pawn back if cd4, you play rook d1. But queen c7 was played. So not going for an isolated queen's pawn position. Instead, we have here rook d1, rook d8. And now interestingly d5, which leaves black with a 3-2 pawn majority, if that's of any significance. The thing is this c5 pawn a target later on the c file? This c5 pawn might be an Achilles heel for black in this position. As well as white's possession of the d5 square is annoying. So we have potentially two strategic issues. Okay, so ed, knight d5. We have a nice bishop for white on d5, it seems. Supported by the pawn on e4. And now an interesting move g3, which would ordinarily weaken some squares on the king, but it supports bishop f4, which is annoying. When I first saw this move, I was a little bit surprised. g3. But note c5 is a potential target. Once this bishop moves, a rook can come to c1, and c5 will be victimized. So, knight a5, bishop f4 with tempo. a4, forcing maybe a pawn forward, tempting a pawn forward. And now we have rook ac1, so a bit of pressure already on c5. So look at white's position. It looks pretty menacing already, actually. A small, nice positional edge. Bishop c6 was played. And now bishop g5, attacking the bishop. And it's tactical bishop g5, as we're about to witness. Now there's a loose knight on a5. So after bishop takes g5, instead of the ordinary recapture, here is where Vladimir did the surprise move. And I hope your score sheet's covered up, everyone on ChessBase server. I wonder if I can give you lot 10 seconds. What did Vladimir play here? And this is interesting. There's a lot of resources sometimes in seemingly obvious recaptures. There's alternatives to playing the obvious recapture. There are sometimes Wiesentzug in between moves. So what did Vladimir play here? 10 seconds starting from now. Right. Okay. Cool. Some guesses on ChessBase. Any guesses on live stream? Well, I'm going to say the move now. 3 guesses on ChessBase, none on live stream. Clearly, the ChessBase audience is much stronger than the live stream audience. just mucking around. Sorry. Anyone on live stream? You got a guess? Okay. All right. I'm going to tell you the move. Okay. So rook takes c5. Yeah. Well done. Or if you've seen it before, well done anyway. So bishop. So what have we got here? If the bishop moves back, then rook takes a5, I suppose. And this is another ingenious resource which I don't see. So bishop went to f6 and then rook takes f5. So he's got a pawn. Now he's a pawn up. Okay, bishop d5, rook takes d5. But is it enough to win? Rook d5, rook d5. Okay, so the extra pawn is this one actually. Otherwise it's symmetrical. If we have a look at this position, symmetrical. This is the extra pawn. Check. And now not a pawn up. And now a pawn up. Nice combination then, if you saw all of this. Queen c2. And okay. Attacking e4, but this bishop's a bit vulnerable, so there's a defensive resource, rook d2. So if it takes, then he just takes the bishop. So queen b3. And now a5, and this pawn looks dangerous actually, a5. It's guided by the queen now, pretty soon. Bishop c3. Now rooks, if you're trying to defend against the opponent's passed pawns, and this is the passed pawn here, the rook needs to come behind it, maybe. Pardon me. Needs to come behind it somewhere. And he does rook d5, so the rook may be coming to b5 to be behind that passed pawn. Queen c2. Queen b7, not minding queen takes e4 here, because it seems a6, a7 is getting to be a strong threat. So black instead plays b3, and after a6 is getting dangerous. b2 dangerous for both sides. Rook b5 protecting now e4 actually as well, but also under lock and key at the moment now. Queen a4. a7 ruthlessly moving his pawn forward. h6 giving some air for the king. e5 blocking the bishop's escape back. King h7, attacking the bishop, rook b3, and now queen a2, saying if the bishop's taken then b1, herding the queen. Okay, Vladimir here, interestingly, plays a waiting move, it seems, with h4. So black's a bit stuck here, and so is white, surely, because this pawn's kept under lock and key from these two guys. So this one from these two guys. So can they do anything? Well, king g8, now h5, putting a bit of a cramp on the king's side. Queen a5. Queen b8. It looks as though a8 is becoming a threat. Queen a2. And I thought this was a really neat finish to the game. Neat and kind of unexpected. I wonder if you can guess what Vladimir played here. So it's his passed pawn versus the opponent's passed pawn. So what does he do here? If I give you 10 seconds, white to play, and it seems win with the next move. So I'll give you 10 seconds starting from now. Well, some of you are saying queen takes rook. I'm not sure that wins, actually. I can try and demonstrate that. I don't think queen takes rook wins. Let's rule it out. King takes, check, king moves, queen, takes, queen. Not good for white. Agree? Queen takes rook is not on. Okay, I'll give you guys another 20 seconds. Let's go for this. This is a brilliancy. I think this is a brilliant finish. I'm going to give you an extra 20 seconds. So I'm being hugely generous because it's only 10 seconds usually on YouTube. But it's time for me to have a Diet Coke. Yeah, so 20 seconds, okay? Starting from now. Okay. The move Vladimir played was a brilliant move, it seems. Maybe unexpected. Maybe some players would miss it. The move played was rook takes c3. Blimey. He's letting black queen a pawn, which seems devastating. It seems absolutely devastating. But what does white play now? If I give you 10 seconds, can you spot white's winning move? 10 seconds starting from now. There's a killer move here. Okay, I'm going to show you. Rook c8. How does black defend this? say he takes, you know, white will be a knight up, check, queen, knight up, you know, threatened with queen h8, so he'd have to get rid of the queens. Not particularly good. Where does the queens move? Say queen e4, he just gets mated, you know, check, mate. You know, queen takes b8, just queens. No defense, is there? There's no defense to this rook c8. Did anyone see a defense? This was it. You know, black resigned. So a strange game, positional, not a sort of positional kind of game. Let's have a look in overview and summary. So you're all convinced this is a winning position, I hope. Yeah. So let's go back and look at the game, shall we? Nope. You're not convinced, Kite Bart. You're not convinced. Sorry. Why isn't this convincing? Do you see a resource for black? Do you see any resource for black? Oh, sorry. Okay. Okay. All right. Let's have a quick review and summary. So it's another positional grind from a Queen's Gambit accepted, seemingly respectable black defense, but there seems to be some sort of liability in this game exposed with c5 in particular, which was seized on with bishop g5. So it seems bishop g5 is eyeing c5, in fact. So maybe this move bishop c6 was a blunder, because c5 is a little bit vulnerable. It was after a4. It did go after a4, but this bishop g5 is interesting. It seems to put black's plans on hold, forcing stuff, check, losing b2, winning a6, pawn up still, and he's offering e4. So even though he's a pawn up, he's offering it here now for positional sacrifice for his own pawn. So after that, you know, combination, we get this position difficult for black already. It seems black's got a chance with his own b pawn, but that is tactically extinguished. He's just waiting, it seems, for the black king to go back to g8, and he's sealing a kind of net here for the king as well, for this horrible combination about to occur. So queen b8, and now bang, the tactic, winning tactic, rook takes c3. I don't know. I don't think we'll ever be able to emulate Kramnik. We can look at his games and be impressed by them, but is anyone here going to be able to play like this in the future? Do you think? I mean, oh, it's amazing, isn't it? Okay, let's go on to another game. So I'll put another game in. McShane playing white against Vladimir. Okay, so Vladimir playing black. We'll flip the board. And e4 from Luke McShane. e5. Knight f3. Knight c6. Bishop b5, and again, you know, knight f6. This dreaded, you know, dreadfully solid system just has the effect of seemingly psyching out the player with white pieces to play something non-standard and inferior. And in this case, Luke played the move d3. So I guess this system's great psychologically. Imagine, you know, you get the reputation of being booked up with this system. Like I was playing against John Cox last year, and I didn't want to play into his Berlin. So I I played something else. I played epoxy English opening like wet lettuce. It was a wet lettuce video on YouTube. But the Berlin's good psychologically if it's prompting white to do these silly deviations, or not silly, but seemingly passive deviations. It seems has black got a bad time here playing just bishop c5. Bishop takes c6, d takes. Okay. There's some sort of strategy here, it seems, to put pressure on e5. So if there was knight takes e5, then queen d4 or bishop f2 or queen d4. So b3. Okay, bishop g4. It looks as though black's got a great position again from the opening as black. No issues at all. Makes it look simple to play with the black pieces against e4. So knight d2, knight d7, bolstering e5, bolstering e5 again, blunting the bishop. Knight f1. Sometimes there's an idea, maybe knight e3 to g3 and coming to f5. Knight f8. Vladimir's got his own ideas as well. Control d4, put pressure on d4. Gives up his light square bishop here. More control of d4. Iron grip. Look at this iron grip on d4. Okay. Knight e3, queen d7. Maybe he's going to castle queenside. Very pleasant position. h4. a5. a4. And now actually Vladimir castles kingside. Maybe he could castle queenside. There's a choice maybe. He castles kingside. White's attack doesn't look too menacing after h5. Vladimir just takes on e3 and locks again down the bishop and d4 with c5. So he's got everything on this d4 square. Okay, everything's on d4. This poor bishop blocked in by this structure is not particularly amazing. Bishop, queen h3. Unpinning the knight, queen c6. White castles, and then knight f4. Queen goes to h2. Okay. Doesn't look particularly amazing on h2. This h5 is a bit weak, maybe. Queen e8, hitting h5. Right. Moves forward. But now g5. g3. The knight goes back. f4, at least trying to liberate the bishop. Trying to break down this bishop. Maybe there's some king safety issue here. But Vladimir just takes, and he takes, seemingly giving white a bit of counterplay now. If white is going to use an exchange sacrifice, which he does use, because otherwise he's just busted. He has to sack the exchange, I think, or does he? Could white have played king h1 here? Is this any good? Maybe, because there are, maybe threats, check, and rook g4, maybe. But actually, Luke decided this was the time to sacrifice the exchange, which does kind of improve the bishop situation. So he played rook takes f4. Okay. Positional exchange sacrifice. E takes f4. Now king f2. The idea unveiled, rook g1 check. Maybe come to g7. Rook f7. Looks a bit dangerous. So queen h5. Queen e6. And now he takes on c5, changing the emphasis of the game a little bit, snatching that pawn. King h8, and the queen now goes to c4, not minding playing the exchange down in the ending, because this bishop seems to be quite good now. Rook e8, rook h1. Queen moves to d7. Queen b5, offering the exchange of queens again. In fact, the queen's now come off. So white is prepared to play this, the exchange down. Rook g1, rook g6. Okay, there's a problem here. Is there? Why doesn't white protect the pawn? Can he not protect the pawn with rook c1? It's a disaster. What did he do in this position? He played king f3. Because if rook takes c2, there's bishop f6 mating. That's the point. The king, the bishop and rook are good on f6. So no, not rook takes c2. So instead, rook d8, rook g5. So this is looking tasty. You know, rook here. You know, get these pawns. Rook f8. Rook g2. Because in that position, okay, let's carry on. Rook g8, trying to get the rooks off. Rook g1. And there's a long technical phase now, it seems. Check. f3. This pawn's now dangerous. d5. Okay, attacking the rook, and it's got to keep hold of f6 here. So rook d6, holding up f6. c4. These pawns look pretty good, rolling, but is this pawn dangerous? King g8, c5. And now a clever little trick, it seems. f5 check. So if e takes f, then rook takes d5, splitting up the pawns. If king takes, then maybe rook g6, and that's dangerous. So actually, the king did take rook g6. So that is dangerous because this pawn looks as though it's dangerous. So the worst is over for black. He's controlling this g file, and this pawn on f3 looks quite dangerous. So bishop d4, rook d1. So f2 is being held at the moment. Rook g2, not much longer. f2 winning the bishop. So black's going up now a rook. Maybe it's technically winning here. He's a rook up. These pawns look still a little bit dangerous though. Rook f7. d6, the king's trying to herd them. But, you know, he is a rook down. Rook g1. I think black's in control of the position here. And now this b4 does create, you know, this pawn's dangerous as well. But it's taken soon. Check. Check. Takes. a5. Well, black is a rook up. Check. Check. And he finds a winning plan here somehow. He's under a bit of pressure because there's a threat of d7. How the rooks defend against that? King e8 defends against d7 maybe. That's the way. So a6, as though, you know, maybe takes rook takes b4 to b8 is going to be dangerous for the king here. Check, getting the king away a bit, and now taking. And after takes a horrible move, rook a7, which sort of implies, you know, king f7 if check. And also this pawn's a bit of a runner. Check, king f7. I think it's more simplified now that black's clearly going to move his pawn. Okay, there might be two connected pass pawns. It takes some time to win this one. Check. And now the pawn starts to be pushed. a5. Rook h8. check, protects the rook, protects h7, and back to the a pawn now, a4. So his queening is he's good with his a pawns, Kramnik. So he lets white queen as well. He plays a2, just letting white queen, because it will be, you know, with check, that would be horrible. So here white actually resigned. Let's have a quick look at this final position. So say d8 queening. So we queen this one, check, king has to move, say, well, it's a rook up anyway, just queen d8 will do, wouldn't it? Queen d1, just winning the queen. Oh well. So I don't know, you know, very solid play by black. I don't know if he's psyching people out with these super solid openings. Quick review and summary. It seems he doesn't have any issues outside of the opening theory, it seems, Vladimir. He gets these incredibly solid positions to play with. Although it did seem dangerous, this positional exchange sacrifice. It seems logical as well to try and liberate the bishop on the diagonal. But it seems, well, Vladimir was able to somehow defend and use his pawn in this endgame. Eventually, his pawn became dangerous on that f3 pawn. A neat little trick with f5 here at the right moment. f5 check. So the pawn actually ended up winning the bishop now. So he was a rook up and was able to solve other issues, being a rook up actually. With rook a7, very neat move. And his a pawn became decisive, like in another game that we've seen earlier. Okay, yeah, so that was Vladimir wiping out the whole, the best British players in the London Classic 2011. I hope you got something out of it. Any comments or questions? Otherwise, or you can leave them on YouTube. I'll upload this to YouTube pretty soon. Okay, thanks very much. I'll be here for the next few minutes. Otherwise, I'll see you next week. Thanks very much.